Hello, hello. Oh, hello everyone. Hopefully there's some people arriving now. We'll give you a couple of minutes just to arrive and settle in. Welcome to this afternoon's talk. If you'd like to, just say hello in the chat. It'd be nice to see where you're all calling in from. We've had a really good sign up for this talk, so it's brilliant to have such an interest in this topic. Maybe we'll just give another 30 seconds just for everyone to settle in. We are recording today's session as well, just to say, so you will be sent a link afterwards, so you don't need to worry too much about taking notes. You can just relax and enjoy it. So I think we'll get started if Ollie, you're ready as well. Great. So I'm Jess Allen. I'm Science and Research Projects Manager at the Tree Council. I'm sure many of you know the Tree Council's a national charity bringing everyone together for the love of trees. Please do check out our website if you're new to us. There's a wealth of information there about...
Yes, sorry, your screen's appeared with your teams on it.
Okay. So there's a wealth of information there about growing and caring for trees and about the science and research projects that we're part of and opportunities for everyone to get involved. And we have an absolutely fascinating talk for you today. But before we introduce our guest speaker, I'm just going to say a few words about National Tree Week. So this talk is part of National Tree Week 2023, and it's always a really special week for us at the Tree Council because it's the start of the tree planting season. But this year it's even more of a special celebration because it marks 50 years since the Plant a Tree in 73 campaign, and that was the start of National Tree Week, and also the Tree Council was born from that too. So perhaps many of you have fond memories of that time and planting a tree back in 1973, and we hope lots of people will have the chance to get out and about and get involved this year too. So check out that website as well. As you can see there, it's nationaltreeweek.org.uk, and find out what's going on in your local area. But now let's turn to the topic for today. So like mince pies and mulled wine, mistletoe probably makes you think of Christmas, but there is so much more to it than that, and today's talk will unravel some of its history and biology. And despite being part of our native flora, we don't really know that much about it. So the research you're going to hear about is really important when thinking about tree health. So here to tell us more and to launch an exciting citizen science project is Ollie Spacey. So Ollie's in his second year of his PhD studies and is based within the Department of Biology at the University of Oxford and also with the Oxford Botanic Gardens. It's been an absolute pleasure for us to be working alongside Ollie and to be supporting his work and play a small part in it. You'll see he's got an incredible knowledge of mistletoe, so you're really in for a treat. He needs your help to get out there and gather data and help us understand more about the future of this plant. So we'll have the chance to put questions to Ollie as well, so please do put any questions you can think of as we go through in the Q&A box. And so yeah, we're recording the session, we'll send a link around afterwards, and without further ado, Ollie, I'll pass over to you.
Thank you so much, Jess, and thank you for that wonderful introduction. So yes, I have a very exciting project to share with you all today, and it's perfectly timed with National Tree Week and also the new mistletoe season. It's the sort of festive season when we can see mistletoe best, and I'm going to be talking to you all about what is mistletoe, why is it important, and how you can help with this project where we're trying to understand more about its current trends and what it's going to be doing in the future. Crucially, it's an important part of our native flora and it has an important impact on our ecosystems. So this is a brilliant chance for you to get involved in some really crucial research. So first of all, mistletoe, let's take a step back. You probably associate it with Christmas, maybe with kissing in particular. You know, you stand under mistletoe and exchange a kiss with someone and pick a berry off. But that is maybe for some people that's where it ends. Maybe some people know a little bit more about mistletoe. That's absolutely fine because that's where we're starting from today. And it's always nice to think about mistletoe in its cultural context as well. It's been really important throughout history for mythology as a symbol of all sorts of different things. And one of the places I really like to start is from a story that was told by Pliny the Elder, the Roman historian. And this is a picture you can see here of some druids taking part in a mistletoe ceremony where they use a golden sickle to cut down a clump of mistletoe from the tree, and they catch it in a white sheet, and it's supposed to symbolize fertility. You can make tea out of the leaves, and when drunk, it will bring fertility and fecundity to those that drink it. And this association with fertility has been a long-standing one, maybe something to do with the white sticky berries. I'll let you do the math on that one. But essentially, it's been seen as this very pure and sacred plant for hundreds, if not thousands of years. Part of how special it's seen as is to do with the fact that it just seems to appear in clumps in trees. And you see from my background here, you've got lots of mistletoe clumps, and they just seem to be there. They're not like another plant which grows from the ground. There's something particularly special about that. And some of you might already know why that is, why mistletoe just seems to come from nowhere on a tree, as if it's just a ball of leaves in the winter, why it has this spherical shape. But that is actually a really key part of its biology. Before we get into the science more deeply, though, I also want to just tell another story, and that is the Norse mythological story of Balder. So Balder was a Norse god, and he was having terrible nightmares that he was going to die very soon. So he went to the gods and say, "Is there anything anyone could do?" And one of the goddesses, Frigg, said, "Yes, I will protect you from all harm that will come to you." Loki didn't really like this, so Loki, god of mischief, said, "No one should get away with this." And lots of people were actually quite angry with Balder that he was immortal and invincible in this way. So Loki said, "I'm going to find out something that will kill him." And Frigg said, only the poison from the mistletoe can kill him. And so Loki got some of this mistletoe, put some on a spear, and shot Balder dead. And that's depicted here with the mistletoe on the floor next to him. So intriguing story. And it's thought that after that, Frigg said mistletoe should not be a symbol of death. It is not the mistletoe's fault. It should be a symbol of love. And so some people say that has influenced our understanding of mistletoe to be a symbol of love. But it's also associated with death in that context as well. So it's got quite a complex, rich history. And so much more than just a plant which grows in a tree. But I've still not answered that key question: is why is it growing there? Why is it growing up in the tree? Why does it seem to appear almost from nowhere? And the answer is that it is a parasite. So mistletoe requires a host tree to grow. It grows in these clumps, as you can see, and it will stay there for tens of years, potentially up to even 30 years, and grow each year up to a size of almost 2 meters in diameter. So they can get really big. And what it's doing as a parasite is it's taking water and nutrients from the tree, things like nitrogen and carbon, that it needs to survive. And this can, of course, have an effect on the tree. The extent of that effect really varies, but that is what it's doing. It's parasitic in that way. And that's why you see it grow in clumps. It's not constrained by the ground, so it can sort of grow in all directions and has this very distinctive spherical clump shape. But still not answered how it gets there in the first place. And that is by birds. So the berries that it produces are picked up by birds, and then they're either pooped out onto a branch below, or the seeds within the berries are wiped directly onto the branch. This is done by mistle thrushes, blackcaps, waxwings, fieldfares, so quite a few birds in Britain. And this is a really nice example of a mutualistic relationship between the birds and the mistletoe. Mistletoe gets its berries spread, it can spread to new areas, and the birds get a little bit of food. So although it's a parasite on the tree, it's actually helpful for the birds. And this is important to think about when we think about why any of this is relevant. These are great stories, and it's really fascinating plant with lots of interesting biology. But why should we as people care in the UK, people that care about nature, people that care about trees? Well, as I say, it needs a host tree to survive. It can grow in lots of different trees, but some trees that it grows on, it particularly likes. One of those is apple trees. So there are lots of orchards in areas like Gloucestershire, Somerset, which have absolutely loads of mistletoes growing in individual trees. And this can actually lead to the trees becoming overwhelmed. It puts a lot of stress on the trees, particularly in times of drought. And this can be bad for fruit production and for the growth of the trees. So that's important. We need to manage it sustainably in some way so it's not overwhelming our orchards. And often that has been achieved by cutting them down regularly. But in some cases, orchards have been neglected, the mistletoes have taken over, and then it's not been possible to really get those orchards back without cutting down the trees, essentially, because they're just so laden with mistletoes. On the other hand, though, mistletoe can do good for the ecosystem. It's providing berries at a time when food is scarce for birds like mistle thrushes. But it's also important for something called nutrient cycling. So the mistletoes are great at taking nutrients from the tree, things like nitrogen. And when those leaves fall from the mistletoe, which happens occasionally, they give that back to the ground. And so it's been shown that mistletoes are actually quite important for cycling these nutrients around in the ecosystem and benefiting other species, not just the birds, but other plant species around as well. There are even suggestions that by restricting the growth of the tree that it's growing on, it's giving other trees around it an advantage, and that promotes biodiversity. So as you can see, why mistletoe is important is quite a complex topic in of itself, but it's very clear that it is having a really important impact on the ecosystem. Some people have even called it an ecosystem engineer because of the way that it influences all of these different species. And there are also some insects which are only found to live on mistletoe. You can read lots more about this on the literature, particularly by one of my collaborators, Jonathan Briggs. And not a lot is understood about these bugs. So we're quite interested into how mistletoe is facilitating these relationships, and what will happen in the future if mistletoe spreads more or if it doesn't spread as much as we expect, and how these other species might be impacted. So we know that mistletoe is important. We know that it's quite interesting, but where is it? And if we're going to understand what its impact in the nation is going to be into the future, we need to understand where it is and where it's going to be. There have been previous surveys which have tried to understand the distribution of mistletoe. So surveys run by the BSBI and then together between the BSBI and Plant Life in the 1990s found that mistletoe is concentrated in certain parts of the UK. So for example, down on the Welsh border near Gloucestershire, there's a high concentration of mistletoe. And this is thought to be driven by several potential factors. So for example, as I mentioned, having the right kinds of trees about. It does grow on all sorts of different trees, but it particularly likes apples, and orchards can be a real stronghold for mistletoe. But this was kind of put into question because orchards have been on the decline in the UK. And originally people thought, oh, maybe this is going to be bad for the mistletoe, seeing as it's living in these places, but that's not happened. What we've actually seen is mistletoe seems to be spreading anecdotally. So the relationship is probably a bit more than meets the eye there. Another suggestion is the parks that we're creating, big open spaces where birds can spread the seeds to well-lit branches. The mistletoe really needs light at that early establishment phase because it's still photosynthesizing. Even though it's taking nitrogen, water from the trees, it needs light to make some of its own sugar. So these wide open spaces that we create in things like parks and gardens could be really helpful for the mistletoe in that case. Climate is really thought to be a big factor, but the extent to this, we still need more data on. So, for example, mistletoe really struggles in cold winters where it gets less than -7 degrees Celsius. So climate is thought to be a big driver. In the kind of lowlands around this area, you see here, mistletoe can grow quite optimally, whereas more north of that, its growth might be restricted. However, we still see some mistletoe growing, so the extent to which this is important is put into question. And finally, the birds. It's the birds that are actually spreading the mistletoe to new places. If the birds are in different places, you know, you've got blackcap here, then the mistletoe can't get there. We really need to start understanding how the birds' distributions are going to change into the future and how that's going to impact the mistletoe, particularly as the climate changes as well. So lots of outstanding questions about the distribution, and we need more data. Two of the things crucially that previous surveys didn't quite do as well as we'd like are presence, absence, and host ID. So as you can see, each of these dots represents at least one record of a mistletoe that's been found in an area. But that doesn't tell you how much mistletoe is there. It could be one mistletoe in one tree, or it could be hundreds of mistletoes in a whole load of trees. And that information is actually really crucial if we want to understand both the potential for mistletoe to spread and what the impact of the mistletoe is going to be on that area and the surrounding area. So that is data that we're keen to collect on mistletoe abundance, not just its presence. And secondly, host trees are difficult to ID, particularly in the winter when trees have lost their leaves. So it's hard to ID trees just based on their bark and based on their winter buds. But we can still move a bit closer to this, and I'm going to talk a bit more about that today. So we need a new survey. We need to understand where mistletoe is most abundant in the UK and how it might spread into the future, the kind of factors which determine where we find it. And that's where you come in. So introducing MistleGo. This is our new national level survey for mistletoe abundance. And as you can see, it's based on an app. So it's run through the ArcGIS Survey 123 app. And you can get a link to that from the QR code. It should have been pasted in the chat as well. So that will either take you to the browser version or to a landing page where you can download the app and then download the survey into it. So you download the ArcGIS Survey 123 app and then the survey into it. And happy to answer more questions about that. But what I want to focus on is what the app does and how you can use it to help our research into understanding where mistletoe is, where it might be in the future, and what might be causing the change. So, as I say, it's run through the Survey 123 app. The icon looks a bit like this. So what you can do if you've got that downloaded, if you're not right now, don't worry, you can do that later. Click on the app. Don't need to set up an account. So you can click continue without signing in. So you can click that there. No need to make any account for this. And then when you've downloaded the survey onto the app, so you'll get that from the QR code, then it will appear here. You can even go to this little QR code thing here once you've got the app and it will add it. And then it's saved. No more downloads necessary. Okay, so you can click on MistleGo. There we go. And it will come to this page here, which just tells you a little bit about the project and what we want you to do. As I say, this survey will run up until February, and then it will be repeated in future years as well. So this is our first year of running this project, why it's so exciting. And you can take part, submit your records up until February, from then on, we'll get more leaves on the tree, so it'll be harder to see the mistletoe. That's really why we do it now, because the mistletoe can be seen. It's still there all year round, but later on, it will be covered by the host leaves. So then you can click collect, and you open up the survey, and you're ready to go. You're ready to submit your record of mistletoe that you found in your area or in an area that you're visiting, for example. You don't have to have mistletoe right where you are. It might just be somewhere that you're going on holiday, or you're visiting friends or family somewhere in the country. You see that they've got some mistletoe somewhere. Fine, you can submit a record then. Okay. The first crucial bit of information that we want is, where is the mistletoe? And this is really easy because it's recorded automatically. So if you allow the Survey 123 app access to your location, then it will use your phone's GPS to automatically say where the mistletoe is. So you can see here, I'm taking this record from the middle of Oxford where I work, and the date is also recorded, so we know what time within the season and what year we've received the record. So that's all done automatically. If you did want to go home after a long walk and then upload any photos of mistletoe that you've taken, then that's completely fine. You just have to set your location manually by clicking on the map. So that's all very easy to do. The second crucial bit of information is submitting your tree photo. So as I said, records before were very difficult to verify. We got records of mistletoes growing on oak trees, for example. That's actually very rare. Oaks are not favoured by mistletoe as a host at all. Mistletoe finds it hard to establish there. So we knew that a lot of those records weren't right and they couldn't really be verified. Submitting a photo allows us to do this. It allows us to see, yes, what you've got there is definitely mistletoe, and it looks like it's this abundant. You can see some example photos there of the kind of clumps. Some are a bit smaller, some are a bit bigger. Healthy ones will typically be green clumps, distinguishing them from nests, which will be brown. You can get some mistletoes that might be dying and they could have wilted a little bit, but typically they'll be green in colour. Or sometimes it's harder to see that if, for example, the sun is behind it, but you can once you've seen a few, you'll see that they're quite different to nests. So you scroll down a little bit, and here's the section where you can upload your tree photos. If you click on the camera icon here, then you will get access to it will access your camera. There we go. And as you can see here, I'm stood in front of a tree with a few clumps in it. As you can see, the sky is quite bright behind it, so they just appear as shadows. That's completely fine. You can still make out the circles of mistletoe here. So here we go. And I click capture. I take a photo of the whole tree. And then that's it. Submit my tree photo. Okay, step 2, done. As I said, one of the things that we really didn't get in the previous surveys was a measure of local abundance. We don't know how concentrated the mistletoe is in a particular area. Is it 100 growing in a tree? Is it just one? That difference is important. And so here's your chance to submit that really crucial information. And you don't need to count the exact number of mistletoes. What we've done is banded levels of abundance, which you can then record. So that's a lot easier. It makes things a lot quicker. So as you can see, there's some examples here of what 2 to 5 mistletoes looks like in the tree. You can see a couple of clumps here. Or maybe it's more like 6 to 10, something like this, where you've got these green clumps here that you can distinguish. In this case, actually, I think the photo that I had a few more. I'm probably going to err on the side of slightly more, because there's probably a couple that I can't see very well. It's more like 11 to 25. So I select that option. We're going to have a go in a second, where you can feed back to us how many clumps you think there are in a particular tree, because that's really the essence of this survey, and that's what's never been collected before. And then, how many trees are in your photo? The nice thing about MistleGo is it allows you to record multiple trees at once. So if you've got 5 trees in a row and they're absolutely infested with mistletoe, you don't have to do each one individually. Take 5 times as long. You can do them all in once and then just say there are 5 trees in my photo, for example. In this case, I just have 1 tree in my photo, so I just selected that. Okay, now on to the final bit of the record, which we are asking for you to submit, and that's the habitat type. As I said before, the spread of mistletoe might be influenced by several things. It might be the climate, but it also might be the type of environment that it's growing in. Is it more growing in orchards? Is it growing on parks? Is it growing on road verges, gardens? And knowing this information is really helpful to us. So if you can specify which type of habitat it's growing in from the options here, or suggest your own, then that would be really helpful. And that's the last part of the survey, which is actually required for you to submit the record. So here, I was just on the edge of a road, so I click that, and I go on to the next page. All of the next page is optional. This is your chance. If you want to add some extra information, you can, but by no means are you expected to when you're submitting a record. So you can add extra close-up photos if you want of some clumps. So in this case, I can just submit a few. That just helps us verify the mistletoe, see it a bit better. You can actually see the leaves of the mistletoe a bit better there. Host ID. As I said, this was information from before that we didn't get, but it is really difficult to ID trees in the winter, as I'm sure lots of you know. So we're not expecting you to record that information yourself, but if you know, then by all means do. In this case, I know that that mistletoe is growing on a lime tree, Tilia, so I can select that there. What you can also do, if you say, I'm not sure what it is, but I want to help you identify it, you can submit more photos of the host, twigs and bark down here, and that will help us ID it on our end. Remember, you're already submitting a photo, so we can see clearly whether it might be one type of tree or another. But yeah, it's not necessary for you to submit host ID as well. Just an added extra if you'd like to. And then the last couple of bits, if you see any of the distinctive mistletoe berries, then that can be helpful for us to understand where mistletoe is reproducing more abundantly. And if you want to submit any more photos of the berries, then that's great, but not crucial for the record, just an optional extra. And finally, if there's anything else you see. Do you see mistle thrushes going back and forth spreading the berries? Do you see lots of small little mistletoe growths like this? These are all, they all suggest different things about the ecology of the mistletoe to us. So it's of interest, but it's by no means necessary for the record. And finally, when you're done, click the tick at the bottom and you can submit your record. And that is it for MistleGo. So click the tick and you can either send it straight away or you can save it in your Outbox. So if you're out and about, you've not got an internet connection, for example, no worries, save it in your Outbox and then it will just submit automatically when you get an internet connection. So you don't need to worry about that. Brilliant. And then once it sends, we'll have received it and you can collect again. And you will have contributed to our understanding of where mistletoe is in the UK and where it's going to spread to. So, as I say, download the survey. You can do that using the QR code here and links that should be in the chat. And then you can start submitting your records of mistletoe near you or mistletoe in an area that you're visiting. And you can either do this at the time or you can take a photo, save it for later and upload it to the app or to the web version. So let's have a go at identifying some clumps. And Jess, I think we're going to work through this together, aren't we?
Yeah.
So this is the crux of the app. This is really what we're asking you to do. Give us an idea of how abundant the mistletoe is in a particular tree. So what do you think, Jess? Out of the options that we have on the left, can you talk me through your thought process if you're trying to make a record on MistleGo of how many clumps you can see there?
Okay, yeah, I'll try my best. So it looks like there's quite a lot in there. So if I was having a quick count, say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, I'd say there's maybe about 22 kind of obvious clumps, but when I look a bit closer, there are some smaller ones that maybe, yeah, like those ones there that I might have missed. And how about the kind of ones that overlap? So there might be 2 in some of those ones that look like a sort of larger clump. So I'd maybe guess for about 26 to 50, erring on the side of caution. Is that okay?
Yeah, that sounds great. That sounds great. It's done exactly what I would do there as well. So there seems to be about 20 or so that are really obvious. But as you can see, there are a few smaller ones here and some which seem to overlap. Now, mistletoe can be slightly different shapes, but typically they're found in spherical clumps. So for example, at the top here, you can see that that's probably 2 clumps that are close together rather than just one. So it's best for us to have a slight overestimation because there's probably a couple that you're going to miss. Even me, I've been looking at this for years now, and I still see that some clumps. I've been looking at a tree for a good half an hour, and still some that I've not managed to see yet. So yeah, I would say 26 to 50 on that one as well. Okay, so now it's your turn to have a MistleGo, and you can either take this as a record on your app, take a photo of the screen. Don't worry, it won't go to our actual data set. We know the time of the day, but you can tell us the number of mistletoes that you can roughly see in that tree.
So hopefully a poll has come up on your screen as well. So if you'd like to tell us what you think. Have a little count myself. Okay. So I would say, shall I say what I would say? Maybe about, I'll probably go for the 2 to 5 category, but maybe I'm underestimating there. What do you think, Ollie?
Yeah, I think I'd go for that as well. I mean, you could potentially get away with 6 to 10. That would also be. I'd say you've got sort of a couple of obvious ones here. Oops, you've got another big, at least 1 or 2 there. It looks like there might be a little one there. So there's probably about 5 or 6. There might be a couple more around here that we're not really seeing. If you were there in person, then you could obviously see them a lot better. You could walk around the tree a little bit more. It'd be a bit more obvious. But yeah, I would say probably 2 to 5 on that one. But remember, these bands are just giving us an idea of rough abundance. So 2 to 5, 6 to 10. Yeah, that'd be awesome. Nice. Well done. Okay, so
before we go further, can you see the poll results?
yes,
We got them on screen. Yeah.
Yep, I can see them. I don't know if I click share whether everyone can see, but it looks like everyone was on the right track, so that's good news.
Yeah, lovely stuff. Okay, so we can go for the next one.
Just launch the next poll. Hopefully the next one should be up on your screen.
Remember, we're looking for the number of mistletoes in the whole picture because you can see for multiple trees at once. So it would be really painstaking if we asked you to count all of these individually, but that's not the kind of information that we're wanting. We don't want exact values. We're wanting an idea. Is there a lot? Is there a small amount? And that's why we've opened these bounds.
Okay, yeah. So that is a lot of mistletoe. So yeah.
No, there on the poll, it's got 51 plus on the app. We'll probably be going for over 100 because there are absolute loads. And you see in these trees down here, there are lots and lots that are overlapping there. You see that these trees are really being overwhelmed there. So yeah, most people get in, certainly in that high bracket. Maybe if you were just looking at this first tree, say from about 26 to 50, but altogether over those 3 trees, there's absolutely loads, probably over 100. So yeah, well done. And then, as I can say, you can quite easily take a photo, record that there's over 100. We can sort of verify that using photo that you're taking as well. and that's your record submitted. So brilliant. You've submitted a record. What then? What is this data actually going to be used for? So as I said before, it's updating our understanding of where mistletoe is found and crucially how abundant it is. But the aim of this really is to understand what is driving the change. So is it being found more in areas where there are orchards? Is it growing more in these trees? Is it growing more in cities, for example? And this will allow us to predict where it's growing in the future. So we can run models understanding how mistletoe is affected by climate and how the climate is expected to change into the future, and predict where it's going to be found in the future. And when we know where mistletoe is going to be more abundant, we know where it might be more of a problem, and other places where actually it's not as present as it used to be, and it was actually doing some good for the ecosystem. It's actually providing some good food for the winter birds, for example. So this will allow us to inform how we manage the mistletoe. You know, it will allow us to say, okay, the mistletoe is probably going to spread into this area into the future. Let's make sure that we can start managing it, maybe cutting it down off a few trees in the right amounts so that it's not becoming a pest, it's not overwhelming the trees, and it will just give us a bit more of a step ahead as mistletoe spreads and is starting to change. So just a few acknowledgements. Thank you so much for the Tree Council for setting this up, and for all the support that they've provided with developing the app and getting it out there for people to use. My collaborator, Jonathan Briggs, who is an absolute expert when it comes to mistletoe, and my supervisors, Chris and Rob from here at Oxford. So thank you all for listening in the audience, and please answer any questions that you have related to mistletoe or the project, or how you can get involved. So thank you all very much.
Great, thank you, Ollie. That was great, and the app looks great, and I think I've tried it and it's really simple and straightforward to use. So I hope that lots of you will be inspired to get out there and use it. We've had one good question, a technical question. If you haven't got a smartphone, how would you go about helping with your research? Is there a way they can still submit results?
Yes, definitely. So long as you have some way of taking a picture, be it a camera, or you can borrow a smartphone from someone else, and you can upload that somewhere. So you might be able to do this, for example, on a computer in a library if you've not got a laptop. Then you can go to the web version of MistleGo. The links are on the web page on the Tree Council's website. So you can go to the web version, no download necessary, and from there you can add the file. Submitting a photo really is crucial for us to verify the record. As I say, this was the downfall of previous surveys. So that is part of the current survey. But then from there, that's the only thing you really need to do technology-wise, and then the rest you can just fill in how many you roughly see, and where it was found. Was it in a garden? Was it in a park?
Okay, brilliant. And another sort of quick question. So when does the survey finish for this first season of data collection?
Yeah, so it will finish at the end of February. If you submit records after that, then we'll still be able to get them and process them. But really, where the season ends in March, because then trees start growing their leaves again, and it's harder to see the mistletoes when it gets to the spring. So yeah, just over this winter. But then, of course, mistletoe will be seen again next winter and the winter after. And so you'll be able to submit records in the future as well if this is something that you wanted to continue taking part in. Yeah. Great,
thank you. Do you want to stop just sharing your screen just now that we've finished the slideshow? Thank you. So another question. So if someone's based somewhere in the country where on your map it didn't look like there was much mistletoe, should they still be out there getting involved and looking for it? Do you think that it might be there and it's just not been found previously?
Yes, definitely. So all the time we get reports of mistletoe popping up in places that we didn't expect. And this could be for all sorts of reasons, that it's just been spread by a bird, which just happens to have had a berry and has gone to that area for the first time, or people have been planting it and then it's started to spread locally. So, for example, I'm from Sheffield, and the mistletoe isn't particularly abundant around there. But I've been driving around where I'm from before and seen a few clumps in the tree and thought, hang on, I didn't think we had any mistletoe here. And it turns out we do. So it is actually popping up in surprising places. And as you see in that map, a few of those places, there were just a couple of dots roughly in the area, but we don't know how abundant it actually is. And so that's what this survey is getting to the heart to. If you've gone on a walk in your local area, you really can't find any, then try doing this elsewhere. So if you're out on holiday somewhere in the country, or you're visiting a friend or family, then you can record the mistletoe there. The location will also be recorded. It can be something. So I know that there is lots, for example, around us in Oxford, and so yeah. You don't just have to do this in your local surrounding area.
Okay, great. And is the map that you showed from the previous surveys, is that available anywhere for people to have a look at, or?
Yes. So this is for publication by Jonathan Briggs. So he reported the mistletoe survey, and so he had a recent publication in 2021 in the journal, in one of the BSBI's journal for British Ireland, and that report is covered there. So if you're quite interested in that study, then I would look at Jonathan Briggs' mistletoe study, BSBI, and it should come up there.
Great. And we've had a couple of questions along the same lines, but do you want negative results? So, for example, if someone goes for a walk or they've got an orchard and they know that there's no mistletoe there, is it useful for them to report that? And is there some way for them to do that?
Yeah, so what I'd suggest in that case, because, if we asked people, for example, to record every tree where they didn't find mistletoe, then it would completely be overwhelmed with trees. But it is still useful to us. So that's something you can either submit it in the app, for example, as extra observations, and just there's an option, for example, to put 0. But otherwise, you can get in touch with us at the Tree Council. Again, there's a contact email, and I can put my contact email in the chat as well, if you're particularly interested in saying, that is helpful for us. So yeah, the focus is on where mistletoe is most abundant, but of course, if it is helpful for us to understand how much people are going out there and not finding it as well.
Great. And we've had a couple of questions about how important it is for people to ID a tree species, the host tree that it's growing on. So how important is that for you? You did talk a little bit about it before. And why does it grow on some trees and not others? Do you know whether we can talk a bit about that?
Yeah, of course. So it is helpful for us to have an understanding of what it's growing on, but we appreciate that host ID records are really difficult to get, so particularly in the winter. So we're going to do our best with that by making it optional. You can submit host ID if you want to, but we don't want that to put people off sending records when it's not absolutely mandatory. So by all means, if you're good at host ID, submit a record and record the host ID, and then hopefully we can get an idea of whether that seems reasonable from the photo that you send in. Of course, we can see whether something is a lime tree versus an apple tree, but other species might be more similar from the photo, and it's harder to verify. So we can't, for all certainty, look at that. The focus here is on abundance. As for why it grows on particular trees and not others, there's quite a lot of work being done on this and lots of different theories. In some cases, it's thought to do with where the birds will spread the mistletoe. In other cases, it's to do with the actual wood of the tree that it struggles to actually penetrate and grow within. Because of course, mistletoe is being a parasite. It is actively growing within the tree to penetrate into it. So various reasons as to why that might be. That's my research to try and understand that. But yeah, the jury is still out. I think.
Okay, brilliant, thank you. And we've had a couple of questions about managing mistletoe and how it does actually affect tree health. So is there any way to gauge what a safe load of mistletoe is for a given tree? And if someone's looking for advice on how to manage it in their tree or their orchard, is there anywhere that you'd particularly point them towards?
Yeah. So I would say the only real effective sort of proven management is cutting it back. But of course, this isn't a long-term solution necessarily, because unless you cut off the whole branch, you've still got some mistletoe in the branch which can re-sprout. So I would say cutting it off at the base when it's getting too big, putting a lot of stress on the tree, can be helpful. Some trees can really grow absolutely fine with quite a lot of mistletoe. Really, like some really big lime trees, for example, still fruit every year, and still grow really well, without, even while experiencing a lot of stress from the mistletoe. So yeah, it's quite difficult. Depends on the species. See how the tree is doing. If you've got an apple tree that it's growing on, is it still fruiting? Does it seem to be growing each year? These are all signs to look out for anyway when you're monitoring tree health. So I would say that just checking in the tree and seeing how it's doing, and then cutting back as necessary. But a little bit of mistletoe, particularly while it's not, it takes quite a while to grow a clump that is quite big. So it will only be growing slowly anyway. I wouldn't be too worried, for example, if you've got some in your garden, unless you're seeing that it's really taking over the tree, and then you can cut it back, just like you might do with ivy, for example.
Okay, thank you. And a sort of opposite question to that in a way. So someone's asking, how can they get mistletoe to grow on their apple tree? So I guess that's sort of thinking about the importance of mistletoe to people, but also people thinking potentially about birds and supporting nature as well. So how would someone go about getting it to grow on their tree?
Yes, so there are now commercial grow your own kits that you can get. Look that up online. And there are lots of really helpful tips in Jonathan Briggs' book, a little book about mistletoe. Roughly, I would say there's a few key things to think about. So the type of tree that you're growing on. So most rosaceous species are pretty good. Apples are a very good choice. Hawthorn it will also grow on, for example. And the key mistake not to make sure that it has light. There was a while ago that you really had to put the seed deep into the bark, and so it could penetrate the tree properly and grow. But actually what you're doing there is you're stopping those early stages when the mistletoe is growing from getting light, and it really needs that to establish. So grow on a branch, medium-sized branch. Various branches work pretty well. They can be quite small as well, and allow it to have access to sunlight. Is really key. It's growing on a tree which will actually accept it, and then it's a waiting game. You won't see anything for a couple of years, really, because all of the growth is happening internally, as it's establishing that connection with the host tree, and then you'll start to see leaves popping up. And the other final tip for growing your own is redundancy. Grow quite a lot in a row, because the survival rate is quite low. Birds, caterpillars, can get the seeds. So you need to plant quite a few. If you get some berries from a mistletoe nearby, it's handy because mistletoes tend to produce a lot of berries when they do produce berries. So yeah, squeeze out the little bit of seed within the berry and just put it on the tree. No need to really dig it in deep and then just wait.
Okay, great. So you need the right tree, some light, and a bit of patience as well. Great, thank you. And then a couple of questions just going back to the MistleGo app. So will the app tell you if any mistletoe has already been recorded in that location or not?
No, it won't. But duplicate records are always handy for us just to get an idea of whether people are measuring the same tree, and then we can actually look at the location and compare photos and make sure that we're not getting duplicate records. We have that flagged up automatically in our database. So don't worry too much about that. Indeed, one of the things we actually want to do here in Oxford is have particular sites where people will make lots of duplicate records of the same trees, so we can try and understand how varied people are in assessing how much mistletoe is in a tree, and also things like host ID, for example. So yeah, not a problem at all. We do all that filtering on our end. It's not going to don't let that put you off going out there and recording some mistletoe.
Great. And do you have plans to share the results of the sort of study, and you want to talk us through a bit about who you want to get involved in the project and how you're going about that?
Yes, definitely. So as I say, the season this year will run until March, and then later on next year we'll be processing all of the data that has come in, and we can draw a rough distribution map of where the records have come from for our first year, and maybe some areas that we really want to target to try and understand whether mistletoe is there or not. So maybe we'll have some gaps. But we will certainly let you all know that. I believe we're setting up a mailing list, so that's something that you'd be able to sign up to, and then we can give you updates on the progress of the project and where your what your records have contributed to.
Great, perfect. There's another question I was just going to ask as well. So Sophie's asking, are they always easy to identify, and are they always high up in the trees? So I think that's a really good question, because when you're walking around, sometimes I see a clump and I think, oh, that might be mistletoe, but it does turn out to be a bird's nest or something like that when you get a bit closer. So yeah, is it always easy to tell?
Yeah, so I think it's certainly something which has quite a sharp learning curve. Once you start getting a knack for seeing it, you'll be able to see it very easily and be able to distinguish it from a bird's nest. So there are a couple of things that people get mistletoe mixed up with. One is bird's nest, another is broom, which is a growth which occurs on some trees. The key thing about mistletoe is that it will typically be green. So sometimes looking at the tree and it's backlit by the sky, it's harder to see that. Most of the time, when you're actually there seeing it in person, you can see that it is a green clump. And when you look closely, you'll be able to see that it has leaves. It's not just a load of twigs together, it actually has leaves on it. And they're kind of a sort of oval shape. So you can really distinguish mistletoe. Nothing else looks like that in this way. I always think it looks, if you see my background right now, it looks a bit like something out of Dr. Seuss, where you've got these little clumps in a tree. And typically they will be spherical. Smaller ones, before they've gotten to that more round shape, might be a bit harder to see. That's fine. As I say, we're not looking for exact measurements here. The bigger ones are more distinctive, I would say. But that's something that we can verify. From most photos that we get sent in, we can see the difference between, say, a bird's nest and a mistletoe. So if you're not 100% sure but want to see, then you can send it in.
Great, perfect. I mean, I just had a question as well. Sort of, what is it about mistletoe that drew you to study it? So you could have studied anything, any type of nature or plant or animal. So what is it about mistletoe that really excites you about researching it?
Yeah, so mistletoe really sits at the heart of a few of my real interests. The first of which is plants, and especially trees, which I think are just absolutely awesome organisms living their lives around us all the time, but doing it in a completely different way to how we do it. And there's so much that we don't understand about them, but we rely on them so much for our everyday lives. I think that's really fascinating. And the other one of my great interests is parasites and how they can exploit something, and that's how they survive, exploiting the host that they live in. And so when the opportunity came to study a plant which is a parasite on trees, I couldn't really turn that down. So I think it's something which is a brilliant system to learn more about. And every time that I learn something more fascinating about it, I think, well, this just keeps getting more interesting. Yeah, mistletoe really is the gift that keeps on giving when it comes to cool facts and being an to other plants and other organisms. So yeah.
Great, thank you. And if people want to find out more, they can go and visit our website. Like you said, there's a way for them to keep in touch with us and keep in touch on the project. So yeah, thank you so much, Ollie, for your time today. I know this is a fieldwork season for you as well, isn't it? So very busy time of year.
Yeah, super busy time. When it gets to this time of year, my calendar is always full. But yes, I wouldn't want anything less.
Great, thank you. So we'll draw things to a close now. So yeah, firstly, thank you to Ollie for sharing so much information. That really was a wonderful insight into your work and the world of mistletoe. We can't wait to see how MistleGo takes off. So I'm sure it'll be something that gets bigger and bigger over the coming years. And hopefully we can have you back on next year to tell people all about how it went and how their data has made a difference. I've got it downloaded onto my smartphone, so I'll be heading out this weekend to go and have a look for some mistletoe. And hopefully we've inspired everyone out there to get involved too. Keep your eyes peeled while you're walking, while you're out and about. Hopefully it motivates you to go outside, even if it's a bit cold and rainy. And yeah, let us know what you think of the app, because that's always really important in sort of first years of a project as well. And yeah, pass it on to your colleagues, your friends, share it on social media, and hopefully together we can better improve our understanding of mistletoe. So yeah, thank you for joining us. Thank you for all your questions and comments. And we hope you enjoy the rest of National Tree Week. So say bye for now.
Thank you everyone so much. Have a lovely day. And thank you very much, Tree Council.